When you think of Byron Bay these days, you're probably thinking of Chris Hemsworth and Zac Efron and Matt Damon. What you should be thinking about is Cape Byron, a whiskey distillery that was co-founded by one of Scotland's most awarded master blenders. And today, I have a sample of their latest release. Hey guys, I'm Nath Martyn, the Whisky Scribe. I'm a whiskey enthusiast and I love all things whiskey, but taste is subjective and there's a lot of different whiskies out there. So whether you consider yourself a connoisseur or you're just looking to understand more about whiskey, let's explore it all together. If you want to see more from me, consider subscribing. I put up new videos every week. You can also follow me over on Instagram. And if you enjoy this video, please do give it a like. It really does help me out and it doesn't cost you a thing. Cape Byron Distillery is local for me, in the Australian sense. It's like a 2.5 hour drive. I've driven further distances for less important things. But it was co-founded by Byron Bay local Eddie Brook and Scottish Master Distiller Jim McEwan. He had a long tenure at Bowmore Distillery and he's probably more well known for 15 years of reopening Brooklardic Distillery. So if you've ever seen the Octomore series, that's Jim McEwan through and through. If you want to know more about Cape Byron Distillery, I have visited the distillery before, so catch the tour video up here. But what I have today is a sample of their Viognier Cask. Viognier. So this is their third whiskey release, but it's the first in a new series that they're calling Small Batch. And with a name like that, you'd expect there'd be limited bottles, and you'd be right. There's only 1,150 of these being made available for sale. Now, it was aged for a minimum of 3 years in a combination of American oak ex-bourbon casks, as well as Australian Viognier casks. So these Viognier casks, they are French oak, but they're an Australian-made wine. And Viognier, if you've never heard of it before, it's a southern French style white wine grape that's usually used to add texture to French wine when you're making it in blends. But these Viognier barrels, they come from Inkwell Wines, and they're a certified organic wine producer in McLaren Vale. Now, Cape Byron's previous release was the Chardonnay cask, which I really rated. You can actually catch that review here, but I'm excited to see another one of their whiskies aged in another Australian white wine barrel. So I have high hopes for this, but let's just get into it. So this one is bottled at 46%, and it spent time aging. The barrels were aged in exposure to the rainforest they have on site at the distillery. So considering I was there earlier this year, I'll probably even walk past these barrels at some point. If you look at that, it's got a real deep golden sort of color there, and really nice thick legs. Like, they're taking a lot of time to make their way down the glass. So the distillery's tasting notes do say things like tropical fruits on the nose, and I'm actually getting that. I'm getting sort of like ripe pineapple, a little bit of apricot, and I think I can pick up a little bit of the white wine notes coming through. But it's got a really strong nose for something that's only 46%. I'm actually really impressed with that nose already. Slange. The texture on this whiskey is fantastic, and I think that's a big bit of Jim McEwan coming through. My first impression is just butter, because it's thick, it's oily, it coats the mouth, and it's this beautiful, yeah, it's like a buttered French treat. But then in there, you also kind of got like these like spiced fruits and things. Legitimately, there's elements of stewed apple. Just loves it when I say stewed apple. I think there's some other stone fruit sort of flavors in there I'm not quite sure of. Actual stone fruit. And that finish is really really smooth. Like that buttery texture just carries it across. The flavors linger in your mouth for such a long time. And it's really interesting because at 46% you would expect it to be a little bit more subtle. The flavors in here are full-bodied, but there's not this massive alcohol burn. So it's quite well balanced. I'm really enjoying that. For me, this sort of sits on par with that Chardonnay cask that I enjoyed so much. It's definitely that signature Cape Byron whiskey flavor. You know, if you were to taste this and the Chardonnay cask side by side, it's very easy to tell that they're from the same distillery. So it's great that you've got that influence from the barrels, but the character of the whiskey itself still actually comes through. And I think part of it is just how oily it is. It's just a thick whiskey. It's going to carry flavor. It can't help but do so. That really is lovely. And considering it's a limited release and we're in the lead up to Christmas, if you are looking for a Christmas gift idea for somebody who likes Australian whiskey, this would be a go-to. It's not overpriced either. I think they're retailing at about $150. This is really good. Did you want to try some?
Who's this whiskey for?
I would say this whiskey would suit anyone who leans a little bit towards the sweeter whiskies but doesn't want like an absolute sherry bomb. But it would probably also be quite appealing for somebody who's more of a white wine enthusiast and dabbles a little bit in whiskey. I can see by Jess's face that she also likes this whiskey.
That's really good. Yeah, wow.
So this gets my seal of approval as well as Jess's. I might not...
This is for me now.
Okay. Jess is going to finish that glass. I'm going to pour myself a little bit. That probably ties up the end of the tasting notes. It was so good, I loved it, and then I lost it to Jess. I mentioned that this is the first of a new batch series. So some of the other expressions they've got marked to come out in this series is whiskey aged in American oak ex-bourbon barrels that also contain Cape Byron's macadamia liqueur, the Mac, that's a beautiful liqueur. So a whiskey aged in that, I'm actually really excited for. As well as French oak wine casks that have been hand selected by industry expert and master distiller Jim McEwan. So if you know anything about Jim McEwan, one of his sort of nicknames is the cask whisperer. He so believes in knowing and understanding the casks that he literally goes out and talks to them like a fanatical gardener talks to his plants. So whiskies that have been hand selected by, well, whiskey barrels that have been hand selected by him should also be something pretty interesting. But look, they're definitely a distillery that's worth keeping your eye on because they've got that tenure from Jim McEwan carrying across, but then Eddie Brook himself is also really understanding the craft and he's really wanting to do things. If you're in America, you may not have seen Cape Byron whiskey yet, but you may have seen Brookie's gin. And Brookie's gin is made at the same distillery. That's also Eddie Brook. So definitely keep your eyes peeled for Cape Byron Distillery. And as I said, they haven't priced themselves out of the market either. $150 for this whiskey is, look, I would actually say it's actually a pretty good price for it. Other Australian whiskies at around about this quality level, you'd be seeing for around $200 a bottle. For a 700ml bottle, I think it's pretty good value actually. I'd snap it up if you get the chance. But if you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, it really does help me out. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. And until next time, I can't toast because Jess stole my glass. Slange. Cheers.